Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And good afternoon to those of you in Europe. And good morning to those of us in this side of the world. In Mexico, it's 4:30 a.m. So I will do my best to portray the ideas of the presentation. I will start sharing my screen now. All right, perfect, thank you. So thank you very much. My name is Norma Contreras, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Twente in the Netherlands. And as I was kindly introduced, I will be talking about the Tango of Mexican animal rights regulation. Is it 2 steps forward and perhaps 1 step back? Okay, so well, the presentation will contain basically starting with the motivation of why doing this research. Then we will look at the main question. And then we will start focusing on the growth of animal non-governmental organizations and then the growth of animal legislation in Mexico. This will be followed by the methodology, which will be divided in the case selection on one part and then the method as such. Then the commonalities between the cases selected and the differences among them. And then we will point out why motivation makes such a huge difference for the cases. Then we will see the conclusions and some unexpected findings. And to conclude, it will be practical implications. Okay, so the motivation of doing this type of study, it's because, as we all know, the highest degree of animal legislation and animal protection is always found in North America and Northern Europe, also in Australia and New Zealand, while Latin America has about mid-level legislation. Thus, there is a need to understand and also to monitor the situation of animal legislation in Latin America. Now, since I'm Mexican, then it made sense to focus in Mexico. So Mexico is geographically located below the United States and above Central America. So in fact, when we look at Mexico in comparison with Europe, we can see that it's a big country. Thus, sorry? Was there a question? Okay, so if we see it's a big country and it has different types of problems when related to animals. All right, so the main question is we want to know to what extent have the attempts to achieve animal regulations been successful at one, creating, then publishing, and then implementing those regulations, and which indications are there about mutual influence of such attempts and the development of social awareness regarding animals or about animals. Now, first we wanted to see how much the animal non-governmental organizations have been growing. And this is because if we look at here, it says the increasing presence of animal NGOs is always a first step in creating awareness. And this awareness later leads to passing animal welfare legislation. So we started looking at 5 national directories that started to recall the growth of these animal non-governmental organizations from 1954, all the way to 2013, when a boom started to happen in this growth of animal non-governmental organizations. And it is still on the rise. In Puebla alone, which is one of the states included in this study, there was an increase from 50 animal NGOs in 2015 to 100 by 2021, and it's still on the growth. So we can see it's a big percentage. Now, a similar situation started to happen in 2011 with the growth of animal legislation at a national level. So we wanted to focus what was happening at the state level and also at the municipal level. And basically, we were able to see that this boom or this increment that started to happen, it created practically a policy diffusion of progressive legislation. Now, we call it progressive legislation because there was the tendency to wanting to ban culturally embedded practices, such as bullfights, cockfights, animal pull carts, animals used in circuses and in religious festivities. So these graphs show from the growth from 2011 to 2015 when this rapid growth started to happen. And afterwards, it did continue to grow, though at a steadier pace. So if we look at here, one of the main things that the activists practically started to focus on was including animal abuse in the penal code as a felony for 16 states, and then the abolition of circuses that used animals in 11 states, and so on. Then we are also, if we look at how this portrays into the Mexican map, then we can see that most of the states already started to have an interest in animal legislation. Similar thing happens when we look at the municipal legislation at the municipal level. This progressive legislation started to happen with the first interest with the abolition of use of animals in circuses, and then bullfights, cockfights, animal use in other types of entertainment, rituals, and other cruel animal practices. So this is how it looks like when we zoom in at the municipal level. Now the methodology is divided into the case selection, then the method. The case selection, practically, we decided to focus on 13 municipal cases, and these cases are spread over two central states, and they are neighboring states in Mexico. One is Puebla, which is more at the center part, and Veracruz at the south center. Now, these two states included one municipality that created one regulation, and this municipality led to the policy diffusion to the rest of the municipalities, 7 in one state, 6 in the other state. The cases were the total. This means the universe, they were the total enacted in both states up to December 2013. Now, when it comes to the method, we use ethnographic data gathered by means of semi-structured interviews. These were corroborated with information from publicly available sources. And then once the information was collected, it was analyzed through theory-guided description. And our basis is the contextual interaction theory developed by Bressers. And on this part of the theory, we use the actor characteristics part. And we look at the motivation of the actors, then their cognitions, and that's their knowledge, and the resources they have available. And this theory is complemented by the theoretical framework for case study analysis of TENTA. And here we use the part of the classification or the actors' roles. So when we look at the map, this is where Puebla, one of the cases, is located, and the other one is Veracruz over here. Okay, now we wanted to see what commonalities the 13 cases had in terms of progress and results of the regulations. So we are able to see that the change in the administrations is a challenge for the survival of programs. Now, what I mean this is the municipal administrations. In Mexico, the shortest time of the administrations is always at the municipal level. It's every 3 years. Practically, they renew themselves. So this poses a change to the previous programs that were developed in the previous administrations, and all the more with the animal topic that is always sadly left at the bottom of the political agenda. Now, we also saw that the more participation of actors does not necessarily guarantee or influence the success of the outcome of the formulation. So even if 2 or 3 actors gather and to create a regulation, they had almost the same likelihood of success than whenever of publishing a regulation than whenever 10 actors gather together. Now, when we look at the mayor's resources, the mayors at the municipal level, they turn out to be crucial for reaching or hindering an outcome. Regardless of the motivations, cognitions, and resources of the other actors, the mayors still play an important role. And this can be seen in a hierarchical system like Mexico. Okay. Following the commonalities, we also saw that short-term shocks to place the animal topic at the political agenda. And what we mean by this is basically some sadly appalling cases of animal mistreatment outrage the population. And for instance, in one of the states, in Puebla, this cat killer case not only became the most important topic in the municipality, but also it spread the outrage at the state level, then also at the national level. It became viral in the social media. In fact, the governor claimed that during his term, this cat killer case was the one that he received most tweets during his whole administration. And that is why, for example, animal abuse was put as a felony in the state's penal code of Puebla. Now, we were also able to see that secondary topics face scarce resources at the implementation. And of course, this happens with the animal topic because, as I mentioned before, it's always put at the bottom of the political agenda. And thus, it has less resources when taking into account for the distribution of those. Now, we saw that flexibility for animal activist participation, even when it's this flexibility between collaboration between the government and the animal activists, even when the agreements are not formal, that means informal agreements, they always contribute to a positive outcome. We also were able to see that opponents with strong resources can negatively influence the outcome at the formulation and implementation level, and all the more if it's the mayor or the second in command to the mayor. Now, the main differences is that we're looking at two states, which one created the regulations top down and the other one bottom up. So this top down refers to regulations that were mandated at the state level, and they were looking at the human health concern, and they wanted the municipalities to manage the overpopulation of basically cats and dogs in order to prevent more rabies cases. So they said, well, we're putting it on the municipalities' hands, and so they should create it. So it was top down. And then when we're talking about bottom up, it was basically the animal activists that wanted to put the animal topic in the political agenda. And it all started to happen because one of the municipalities in Mexico became the first municipality to abolish bullfights in all the country. And thus, the activists in that state saw a window of opportunity to put this kind of practices and to wanting to ban them at a legislation level. Now, when we look at the differences between these cases, we're able to see that when it comes to policy diffusion, the wider the scope, that is the wanting to include more animal protection or more animals into the regulations, then the more complicated it is for animal activists to be able to pass the regulations. So the narrower the scope, it was easier for them to pass it. Then when we look at the actors' cognitions, we can see that in cases where there was shared learning, it was important to develop actions in favor of animals in the implementation phase. And whenever there wasn't this shared learning or the share of cognitions, then it was more challenging to develop these actions in favor of animals. Now, when we look at the implementation phases of the regulations, the more participation of more actors, then the better results. Now, when it comes to animal regulations in Mexico, it is always assigned the animal centers as the main body to implement such regulations. However, the regulation also considers, for example, involving the firefighters or the police or even the public attorney. So whenever there's more participation of these actors, then the better results at the implementation level. And also, in looking at the implementation, motivation turned out to be more important than resources. All of the regulations, all of the actors interviewed mentioned that in the implementation phase, there were scarce resources. But what made the difference and what made more progress into protecting animals was the motivation of the actors, regardless of how much resources they had. So this leads us to actually look at motivation as the actor characteristic that is more important than cognitions. That's this shared knowledge, and the resources in the formulation and implementation phases. Cognitions can be learned, they can be acquired throughout the process, and resources can sometimes be acquired or not. But as again, motivation is what makes the difference. So for the conclusions, we basically look at bottom-up versus top-down legislation. So the bottom-up has the bottom-up cases, they had a broader scope, so they wanted to protect more animals. And regardless whether they ultimately succeeded in publishing those regulations, people's awareness did increase. So to call it like in simpler terms, it was like a noisier type of development of this legislation. And this ultimately created more social change. In a top-down scheme, it was a narrower scope. Basically, they just focus on the human health concern of the overpopulation of dogs and cats. So basically, we were able to see that linking the animal topic to a human health problem or to other human concern can perhaps serve as piggybacking or framing strategy for animal activists. But when just human health is put to the central stage, then the impact on the growth of respect for animals might be less. Also, in the conclusions, we were able to see that whenever there's a presence of other actors besides the government, such as those who have a genuine interest in the animal topic, then this results into the creation of more actions aligned to the regulation, to what the regulation says. And in some cases, these actions even go beyond the scope of the regulation, seeking more protection to other animal species. And sometimes wanting to make changes to the legislation as such, or even pass other laws. Now, and during the conclusions, one of the unexpected findings was that the animal activists are always key when it comes to animal regulations. However, they turn out to be essential in the implementation phase, because even though they're not the main body assigned during the regulations to have the responsibility of enforcing the regulation, many times the government is not as interested in developing public policy related to animals. So this is where the play from the animal activist actually makes a difference if they're involved to achieve a degree of success. And this is because they're closely interconnected to the citizens. In fact, the citizens feel more comfortable reaching out to them than to the authorities. And they also claim, the animal activists, that even though the regulations were not enforced as envisioned, they were now able to underpin their work to the legislation, which previously they had no legal document to back up their actions, and afterwards they did. We also saw that animal networks are essential to broaden the animal cause. Now, this is very important because many times the animal activists or animal organizations, they have different focuses. And many of them just focus on dogs and cats. Some others focus on veganism or promoting anti-bullfight campaigns and stuff. But sometimes even among them, they have differences. For example, whether they should apply policy of no kill, or whether they should be able to put down animals if they are suffering, and things like that. So these differences, the government perceives them very well. But whenever animal NGOs form these animal networks and they speak with one voice, then they are able to maintain the animal topic in the political agenda. So the government sees them as one front. And sometimes they are even able to reach out to international animal government or non-governmental organizations, which in fact gives them more prestige. They are also able to reach out to different type of animal practitioners, specialists, whether they specialize in veganism or perhaps in animal behavior and so on. So they're able to sort of portray their ideas with more scientific arguments to the government. They also help more in extending awareness among the society, and they basically reinforce the hypothesis of the interplay between the creation of the relations and the achievement of social change. Thus, we are able to see that the main conclusion is that based on later developments and until 2020, we can conclude that the degree of social change towards respecting animals is likely as much a result of the social and political process to establish regulation than of the regulation itself. Therefore, regulation is not a fixer, but it certainly is a catalyst. Now, for the practical implications for animal practitioners, we are able to see that there should be a willingness to collaborate with the government. So if they want to develop animal legislation or be involved into animal public policy, then they cannot be fighting with the government. They have to be willing to collaborate. The citizens' involvement is also very important. So if they are able, the animal practitioners, if they are able to involve citizens at the formulation stage of the regulations, this can increase receptivity during the implementation, receptivity of the citizens as such. They're no longer seeing this regulation as something that they don't even know that it exists, or they don't even know how to use it. Also, the animal-centered workers should be heard. Now, in Mexico, the animal-centered workers, sadly, are not people who are prepared in terms of animal management or animal behavior. Practically, these workers are sent to the animal centers, sometimes even as a punishment, because they underperform in other parts of the government, and their work is seen as below. Like, for example, when it happens with the people that pick up after the trash and stuff. So the same thing, the same kind of view is to the animal-centered workers. But whenever they are heard, or if they are involved during the formulation stage and later at the implementation stage, then they have acquired the knowledge, because they are also in close contact with the citizens. Sometimes when they pick an animal up from the streets and then the citizens go and collect them from the animal centers, then they have not a good relationship with the animal-centered workers. They have a bad one, in fact, but they have acquired the knowledge on how people react, how their work is done. So they should be heard. Their ideas are important during the formulation, and then they tend to be more receptive at the implementation level. They feel they are taken into account. Then they know how to apply or enforce the regulations. Also, some practical implications is that they offer advice to citizens. They should be open to offer advice to citizens to properly make and follow up on animal mistreatment complaints. And the animal topic is not an easy topic for the society. It involves the neighborhood, the neighbors mistreating the animals. So sometimes they feel alone whenever they want to make a complaint. But if animal practitioners get involved on how to conduct the process, then the society is more willing to make such complaints. And then finally, the animal networks can aid in training governmental bodies. As I said, these animal networks are formed by specialists, so they can help training the police or the firefighters on why looking at animal protection is also in the benefit of society. And that will be all. Thank you very much. And my contact details are here.